Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing fabulously well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so glad the overcast weather is over and it's a lovely day today, and I hope it is where you are as well. So before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And we've got a very exciting part of the story because we've learnt that, Ryan was abducted by something during the middle of the night. Not sure what it is that was abducting him, but he's very fascinated about what happened to him while he was out camping and he was stolen away from his tent. So let's continue with our story tonight. Before long, Ryan was happily settled at his camp, enjoying a nice cup of tea and some hearty, thick oatmeal porridge served with plenty of sugar to keep his energy up. That was when Ryan observed a tall, lofty creature with a monstrously huge back, with ponderous shoulders, ripped in every possible way imaginable, with muscles everywhere, and covered in long dark hair, moving through the trees towards him. Ryan was so confounded. He knew he was seeing a big, strapping male Bigfoot, with a face that almost looked human. And in that second he realized that this was probably his abductor from the night before last. The Bigfoot was moving boldly towards him, and then he stopped quite abruptly about 2 feet away from Ryan. In that moment, Ryan felt absolutely no fear. It was probably because he was so shocked, so taken aback by this bizarre, rather outlandish encounter, that he didn't have time to process what he was seeing or even engage in any feelings of fear. For a moment Ryan tried desperately to avoid any eye contact with the Bigfoot, but he couldn't help himself. His eyes were magnetically drawn up to meet the Bigfoot's gaze, and although the Bigfoot didn't speak to him in an audible language, a telepathic form of communication between the two of them began. "Why did you come back here?" were the words he heard very clearly in his head. "We moved you away for your safety, but you foolishly come back here again. Do not do it again. Don't do it tonight, because you are sleeping on a portal that opens up every 2 days. If you are camping on the spot when the portal opens, it'll swallow you whole, and you'll be gone from this place and unlikely to be able to return. You have been warned." And with that, the Bigfoot turned around and simply walked away. At this point, Ryan was rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Had that really just happened? A Bigfoot had spoken to him, had told him he had set up a camp on a portal that opens every 2 days and could potentially swallow him. Well, swallow him in his tent if he wasn't careful. The Bigfoot's words rang an alarm in his head, like a resounding bell. And after that bizarre experience, Ryan knew he needed to move away at once from this camping spot. Ryan had never believed that portals or Bigfoots existed, but now he was having to re-examine everything he thought he believed. It was on the last official night of his camp, when Ryan was camping a lot closer to where his car was parked. He was lying in his tent, fast asleep, and then he heard the whispering sounds again. But he was so caught up in his sleep he thought he was dreaming. But when he got up the following morning and ventured outside his tent, he observed a sign on the ground, made from twigs and stones, like the sign he'd seen outside his backpack a couple of nights earlier. He knew at once it was a message from the Bigfoots. When he pondered what the message could possibly mean, that was when the Bigfoot's voice entered his head. "Thank you for paying attention to our message. Have a safe journey home." Ryan was bemused by this experience, and as he made his way back down the trail to the car park, he did pass a few hikers along his way, who had left the car park themselves and were now embarking on their own little intrepid adventures. Ryan wished them well, of course, and assured them that his trip had been very peaceful. When he finally returned back to his car, the moment he sat in the front seat, he felt sick to his stomach. He needed to take the long trip back to Fishtown, and he wasn't sure he could actually face it, as it meant coming to terms with his wife having cheated on him and his brother's most horrifying betrayal. "I will stay with Ivan Thomas for a few days," he told himself. "Ivan would tell me what I should do. I'm going to have to divorce Alice. he told himself. How can I trust someone who's cheated on me with my brother? But the thought of living a life without Alice from this point on seemed too unbearable for him to contemplate. When Ryan arrived in Fishtown, he made his way to Ivan's apartment, that, like his apartment that he shared with Alice, was also situated above some commercial real estate. Ivan had lived in that apartment for 3 years with his wife Lisa, but Lisa was almost never there, as she was an air hostess and spent half her life in the air. Ryan didn't realize what a sorry sight he looked when Ivan opened the door to him. "Ryan, is that you?" asked Ivan, looking somewhat shocked to see his dishevelled friend in the doorway. "You better come in. Everyone's been worried sick about you. Where the hell have you been, Ryan? I wish to God you'd called me. You've been gone for days, and you haven't even bothered to contact Alice to tell her you're all right. How could you be so cruel like that?" She's not going to be my wife for much longer, is she? If you must know, I've been camping in the Appalachian Mountains for a few days, and there is no way I was going to tell the likes of Alice where I was. She doesn't care about me anyway. You know that's not true, Ryan. Honestly, you're talking nonsense. Luckily for us, Ron Fielding told us at work that you'd gone camping somewhere. He said you were very vague and non-committal about it on the phone, so we didn't know where the hell you'd gone. But at least you had the courtesy to phone him, and let everyone know you were taking a week off. What the hell is going on with you, Ryan? Everyone's in such a frantic state, and Alice has been doing her nut trying to locate your whereabouts. That woman loves the bones of you, and honestly I don't know why, given the way you've treated her, bogging off into the sunset without so much as a bye or leave. Alice concerned about me? Are you joking?" said Ryan with a contemptuous snort. "Give me a break, Ivan. All Alice cares about is Alice. I'm in no doubt that your sister Angeline has probably informed you about what Alice and my brother Piers were getting up to behind my back. All I can say is it was a good job we came back from your fishing trip early, because of your stomach cramps, or I might never have caught my brother in bed with Alice. In case they didn't inform you about the juicy details, yes, they were sleeping together, doing the dirty on me, obviously. I loved her so much, Ivan, you have no idea. She was everything to me, my entire world. And then she does that to me, goes and cheats on me like this. And as for my brother Piers, I have no words. I mean, that kind of insidious betrayal is unacceptable in every way. Look, Ryan, you've got everything horribly wrong. And you look dreadful, absolutely dreadful. I can see you're in emotional turmoil. Judging by the physical state of you, which is not pretty at all, you look rather like a shabby dog that has been rolling around in the mud at will. Go and have a hot shower in my bathroom, will you? I've never seen you look this dishevelled. I'll leave you out some towels and clean clothes, and we've got some talking to do. Plenty of talking. Of course, before you ask, you can stay here as long as you like. I have to say, Ryan, I barely recognised you standing in my doorway. You've lost a lot of weight. Well, can you blame me for losing weight? I've been in a state, haven't I? I've been doing a lot of physical exertion, so that I don't have to think about what Alice and Piers did to me. When Ryan was in Ivan's bathroom and took a look at his sorry reflection in the mirror, he couldn't believe how bad he actually looked. He really was quite gaunt in the face, and he had scratches all over his cheeks and neck, and there was a bit of stubble developing on his chin that really did him no favours. His blonde hair looked like a bird's nest. No wonder Ryan looked so bewildered seeing him at the door looking like this. I guess I've been to hell and back in a handbasket over the last few days, and it's certainly showing up in my appearance. It was true. With all the walking Ryan had done, he had lost weight, and was covered in blisters on his toes and feet, that although they'd barely troubled him on his long treks, when walking through the wilderness, he'd refused to take notice of them, because his scorched emotions had made all physical pain barely even conspicuous. When Ryan emerged from the shower, the hot water and soap made him feel so much better. He looked infinitely more respectable, as if he'd returned to the land of the living. My word, you've scrubbed up well. You look like a completely different entity, said Ivan approvingly. Come and have something to eat. I've ordered some Chinese takeaways for us. They look delicious, Ryan admitted, and was surprised to find he was ravenously hungry. We'll talk after we've eaten, said Ivan. The two of them tucked into the food together, and Ivan then said very matter-of-factly, Alice has not cheated on you, Ryan, nor has your brother Piers betrayed your trust. You got your wires completely twisted. You barged out of your apartment before Alice and Piers were able to explain what happened that night. Alice was absolutely devastated that you dared to believe she was capable of cheating on you. They were calling after you, trying to explain everything to you, but you refused to listen. Alice said you were like a zombie, walking back to your car, and just not indulging their need to talk to you. Ryan was now annoyed. How dare Ivan suggest that Alice was not cheating on him? He wasn't blind, was he? He'd returned home to find the two of them cuddled up in bed together. He wasn't born yesterday. He knew what had been going on. He wasn't a prize idiot, was he? Don't look at me like that, said Ivan, reading Ryan's mind as if it were a book. You have no idea what a state Alice has been in since you bogged off the way you did. You were cruel leaving her that way. You have no idea how much that woman loves you, as I keep saying. And as for Piers, he adores you as well. And he's been all over the place worried sick about you, and fearing for Meredith. It's been too dreadful for words. I can't tell you what has been going on over here. Well, I'm glad Alice and Piers have some kind of a conscience. But what they did, Ivan, was inexcusable. I mean, how do I move on from here? That's what I want to know. Listen to me, Ryan. Haven't you heard a single word I've said? You need to understand the story, and then you will comprehend why you got what you saw so very twisted. What is there to understand, Ivan? I saw Alice and Piers in my bed cuddled up together. It's all self-explanatory to me. I'm not going to deny that that is true. You did see them in bed together, but you got everything completely wrong. Let me explain. You do know that Piers has been having problems with his girlfriend Meredith. I understand he told you what was going on with them. Of course I know what's going on with them, snapped Ryan. More fool me for magnanimously allowing him to move in with us. I never knew he'd make a play for my wife under my own roof, and I show him all this incredibly kind hospitality. It makes me sick to my stomach. Yes, I'm sorry things weren't going well for his girlfriend Meredith, but it doesn't mean he can get cosy with my wife instead, when my back is turned. That is the lowest thing a man can do to his brother, and when my mother learns about this, she'll kill him, I promise you. Ryan, you need to listen to me. You're seeing everything through a distorted lens. Would you please let me finish what I'm telling you before you jump to all kinds of wild conclusions that are completely off the mark? Not everything you physically see with the naked eye may be what it first appears. But when you saw your brother and wife sharing the same bed, you automatically feared the worst. And any man in your predicament, wearing your shoes, would likely feel much the same. Go on, then, said Ryan sarcastically. I know what you're doing. You're trying to make lousy excuses for Alice and Piers to excuse their treacherous, insidious behaviour. And I'm sorry, I just can't forgive them for what they've done. They've done nothing wrong, for goodness sake, apart from sharing the same bed. Listen to what I have to say. You know that Pierce's girlfriend Meredith recently became very emotional, very overwrought. She was having night terrors as the memory of her uncle sexually abusing her came surfing back. She suppressed those memories for many years, Piers believes, and then when Meredith felt safe with him, in her relationship with him, she was now allowing that emotional trauma that she'd buried to come to the surface again, so that she could deal with it. Ostensibly, when she started reliving the horrors of her abuse, she was begging your brother to kill her uncle for her, but he refused, which is why Meredith kicked him out of their apartment, claiming that Piers didn't love her, simply because he wouldn't kill the man who had hurt her so very badly when she was a girl. But I know all about that, said Ryan. You're not telling me something I don't know. And what has that got to do with anything besides? Don't get me wrong, I do feel awfully sorry for Meredith, having been pursued by a predator in her own family. But it was wrong for her to expect my brother to kill her uncle for her. Although, don't get me wrong, if I was wearing her shoes, I might possibly feel the same way about the man and want to kill him. But we can't act out our feelings in this life. We have to exercise the restraints of the law. It's not for us to play judge, jury, and executioner. My brother was obviously upset with Meredith because she'd kicked him out of their apartment. I told him it was probably temporary and that Meredith would probably come to her senses and that she was just venting. But what has that got to do with anything? It's got a whole lot to do with everything. And why your brother was in such a state when you found him in bed with your wife. It's simple, Ryan. What happened while we were away on our fishing trip was that Piers learned that Meredith's uncle had been shot in the head at point-blank range, killed instantly. The police believed it was a homicide, and it was confirmed later by the medical examiner. They were investigating who could possibly have done this to Meredith's uncle. Your brother was beside himself with grief. He believed Meredith, in a moment of unguarded impulse, had gone off, bought a gun, and killed her uncle, simply because he'd refused to do it for her. He tried to contact her himself, and even went over to their apartment, but she was nowhere to be found. Piers was left with no choice but to contact the police immediately on Meredith's behalf. He believed she was in such emotional turmoil that in her despair over the abuse she was subjected to as a young girl, had shot her uncle at point-blank range. And then he was concerned that she might have topped herself afterwards. So you can imagine the state he was in. The police, privy to the whole story, were looking for Meredith everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. Can you imagine how frantic your brother was? He was in such a state, let me tell you. Alice was beside herself. She didn't know what she could do to comfort your brother, who refused to be comforted. So she plied him with lots of wine to help him relax. She described him as being in a desperate state. Piers was so frantically worried that Meredith had killed herself, and he began to blame himself for everything, especially after drinking so much. In fact, they both drank too much because, Alice wanted to drink with him to make him feel not so alone. So he vomited all over his bed in the spare bedroom. And your brother was so inebriated, as was Alice, and far too tired they were to make up a spare bed for Piers with new sheets. So Alice told him he could sleep on your side of the bed and share your king-size bed with her. She even put a pillow between the two of them as a dividing line. She said during the night, in her unconscious state, she wrapped her arms around Piers, believing he was you, but nothing happened between the two of them. Nothing at all. Piers only shared a bed with Alice because his bed had been so messed up by his own vomit, and it was too much like hard work to change the sheets in the middle of the night, especially when you're half cut like that. Alice said she should have asked Piers to sleep on the sofa, but she couldn't do that to him. She thought that would be cruel, and she can't bear sleeping on the sofa herself, because she's got quite a bad back. But given his emotional state, he probably needed a good night's sleep in the bed. The sofa's very uncomfortable. The only thing Alice is guilty of is looking out for your brother, that's all. And as for Piers, he was in such a state, far too much of a state to get frisky with your wife. I imagine that was the last thing going on in his mind. Not that he'd ever do that to you anyway. He'd never betray your trust like that. You should have known that of him. Let's not kid, Piers's whole world came crashing down, and he was hanging on to the vain thread of hope that Meredith might still be alive. Imagine going through that. Meredith is your brother's world, and I'm sure you know that to be true. Are you being serious about all of this? Asked Ryan, looking gobsmacked. You mean Piers and Alice never slept together in the way I believe they did? They were just sharing a bed very innocently? Absolutely, that's what they were doing. You really do get your wires twisted, don't you, Ryan? Not everything is as it seems. I'm such a prize idiot, aren't I? Said Ryan, slapping himself across the face. I can't believe I was so quick to believe the very worst of my Alice, and that she would do the dirty on me like that. I know she's not like that, but she had her arm around Piers. What was I supposed to think when I saw them cuddled up together like that? It was natural to assume the very worst. Well, Alice understood how you must have got the wrong end of the stick, but she was upset that you failed to listen to what they had to say to you, because they could have explained to you what was going on. But she did admit it looked bad being cozied up in bed with your brother, especially while you'd walked in on that scene. But you never gave her a chance to explain, did you? She was saying she'd been cheated on herself by her ex-boyfriend Dustin, who she believed she'd one day marry. and walking in on him with another woman had cut her to the quick. She said she'd never put you through the same kind of tormented torture, especially given how much she loves you. She was simply sharing a bed very innocently with your brother. They were too drunk to change the sheets in his bedroom, and she didn't want him to sleep on an uncomfortable couch when he was in such an understandably dreadful state, as you can imagine." "Well, when you put it like that, it's easy to understand," Ryan admitted. "If another woman slipped into my bed while Alice was away, I would probably, in a half-sleep, cuddle up to the woman, believing she was probably Alice. I suppose it can easily happen." "But of course it can easily happen," said Ivan. "I've done it myself once with Angeline. We had to share a bed once at a bed and breakfast. I woke up in the morning with my arms around her." "What about Piers? Have they found Meredith?" asked Ryan. "Please God she didn't top herself, did she? I hope to God she didn't. But if she killed her uncle, she could potentially be charged with his murder. And my brother, well, he's not going to handle that well. She could go down for life, couldn't she? He genuinely loves Meredith, although recently with all the memories of her uncle's abuse coming back full force, it's really put a bit of a dent in their relationship. But I'm sure it's fixable with time. But now all this has to happen." "The good news is they found Meredith alive and well," said Ivan. "Your brother was heartily relieved. She had gone off to stay with an aunt of hers in Toronto. Turns out she was so devastated about her repressed memories coming back. And this aunt of hers is the sister of the man that abused her. But she's never liked her brother, and always believed he was a perverse psychopath. Meredith phoned this aunt of hers. Apparently she's close to the woman. She confided in her about the repressed memories, and how angry she was with her uncle, and how much she wanted to kill him. I'm told she didn't hold back on anything. Meredith's aunt was very concerned, and told her to come and stay with her for a while, as she was worried Meredith would do something stupid, which might end up meaning she'd get into trouble with the law. She knew that in Meredith's fragile emotional state, she might genuinely go off and shoot her brother, and as a consequence ruin her entire life. The good news is that it would have been impossible for Meredith to have killed her uncle, but someone did, and for a day or so the police thought that Meredith had arranged for her uncle to be murdered by a hitman of sorts. They didn't know if there was anyone else who might have a motive to kill her uncle, other than Meredith herself. Please don't tell me Meredith hired someone to kill her uncle. I hope she didn't do something as stupid as that. Please God she didn't, did she?" asked Ryan, clasping both hands over his head in a self-soothing gesture. "You would think that Meredith had pulled the trigger in a moment of madness, wouldn't you? Because the coincidences are extraordinary. But that's not what happened. The story is weirder than you think," Ivan assured him. "Well, what did happen then?" asked Ryan, looking befuddled. "You said yourself that the man was shot in the head. So someone killed him." "It turns out that another young woman was sexually abused by Meredith's uncle, I'm afraid to say, when she was a little girl. She hadn't told her boyfriend about any of it, and one night she just came clean, told him about her troubled past, and the abuse she had experienced at the hands of Meredith's uncle. But unlike Meredith, she didn't ask her boyfriend to kill Meredith's uncle for her. That day, the boyfriend, who had no criminal convictions whatsoever, impulsively drove up to Meredith's uncle's home and knocked at the door, and when Meredith's uncle answered, he shot him in the head at point-blank range. They say he might get off for the murder, given the circumstances, as his actions were driven by impulse rather than premeditation. It turns out many women are coming forward, claiming to have been sexually abused by Meredith's uncle, and even the police say he got what he deserved." "Well, that's a relief," said Ryan. "How is Meredith?" "Well, she and your brother are back together again, of course. She did admit she never would have wanted Piers to go through with murdering her uncle for her. But she said in the spur of the moment, when she began to remember all the abuse, she wanted him dead more than anything else in this world. It turns out this aunt of hers in Toronto has helped her make peace with what happened to her all those years ago, and she does want to let it go and move on with her life." "Well, I'm glad she can move forward," said Ryan, "but I imagine she's happy her uncle is no longer alive. I think she's very happy about that, and so is Piers, of course." "Well, that is great news," said Ryan. I think I've got some making up to do as far as Alice is concerned. But where to start, that is the question. You don't need to worry about that, Ryan. It was all a misunderstanding on both of your parts. Alice will be here in any moment anyway. I called her when you were having a shower in the bathroom. I said I'd give you something to eat and tell you everything that had really happened, so that you would understand that nothing was going on between her and Piers. I told her to pop around here in about 3 hours' time, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay put. Well, that is a relief. I'm suddenly very tired, Ryan admitted, and being confronted with all these startling revelations has knocked me for 6. I feel relieved I got everything so terribly wrong. I also feel like a prize idiot. And then all this stuff about Meredith and her issues from the past with that uncle of hers is exhausting. To tell you the truth, I feel as if I've been flung headfirst into a movie. And what is hard to fathom is that this is my own life. This sort of stuff I thought happened to other people, but not to someone like me. That's what Alice was saying about the things that happened of late. They don't feel real, do they? So tell me, said Ivan, what about your trip to the Appalachian Mountains? I bet it wasn't half as eventful as the things that have been going on right here at home. Believe it or not, Ivan, it may surprise you to know that I've been through an adventure all of my own. For the first few days, everything went swimmingly on my trip, of course. I pushed myself so hard physically, because I didn't want to think of Alice or Piers, did I? And the physical exertion really helped me, on the emotional front, because I was far too spent to brood over the chaotic disorder of my life. Well, I can see that explains a lot, and why you look so desperately gaunt and undernourished, Ryan. You've been pushing yourself far too hard, and not refueling your body with the extra calories it obviously needed. Things could have been so different for you if you had allowed Alice and Piers to explain themselves properly, but you never gave them the chance to do that. You naturally assumed the worst. Not that I blame you, of course. It didn't look good walking in on them sleeping in bed together. Anyway, tell me about your adventure, Ryan. I'm very curious about it, but I don't believe for a second it could be as riveting as what was happening here at home, because it really was like a movie playing out in real life. What with Meredith disappearing and not knowing where she was and fearing that she'd topped herself, and then we find her and discover that somebody else had murdered her uncle and it wasn't her. There's no way you could beat what happened to us. I think I can, actually, because my story is paradoxical to say the very least. I have to pinch myself over and over again to tell myself it actually happened. Well, now you've got me interested, said Ivan, sitting up abruptly from his seat and staring curiously at Ryan. Well, as I was saying, for the first 4 days on my trip, I was enjoying the solitude. I passed a few hikers on the trail, but more often than not, I was very much left on my own. One night I camped against a rocky outcrop in a wooded area overlooking a lovely stream. It was the best camping spot of them all, and I honestly thought it was perfect in every way, until I realized it was anything but. That evening, when I was camping at this magnificent location, I went off to wash my dirty dishes in the icy cold water of the stream, and that was when I had this overwhelming sense that I was being watched. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. It felt as if eyes were burning into the back of my skull. And when I looked towards the wooded area, there was some yellow eye shine, about 8 feet off the ground, along with shadowy beings moving behind the trees. But when I looked again, they weren't there. I could also hear these strange whispering sounds. It was all over the place. It was everywhere. Very, very disquieting it was. But I told myself I'd been alone for so long that I was making things up as I go along in my head. But I don't mind admitting to you, Ivan, when I retired to my sleeping bag that evening, I felt somewhat rattled. But frankly, I was far too tired to care. Good Lord, such an experience would have freaked me out, Ivan admitted. There you are, camping out in the middle of nowhere, and you experience the sense that you're not alone, and that something is watching you. Then you hear all the whispering, and then you see those dark shadows in the woods, and that yellow eye shine at 8 feet off the ground. I'm surprised you got any sleep at all, frankly. Well, I was absolutely exhausted, wasn't I? I'd been pushing myself far too hard. I had nasty blisters on my feet, aches in all of my muscles, but I ignored it all. I really didn't care. I was hurting so much about what I believed was Alice's betrayal, so any physical impediments seemed like nothing to me. Anyway, that night I went to sleep in my sleeping bag and ended up having a very lucid dream. Only I'm afraid to say it wasn't a dream. What do you mean it wasn't a dream? Asked Ivan, looking a bit startled. Well, what I thought was a dream was really playing out in our time, in our reality. But it was all so very surreal. It was hard to believe it was actually happening, that it was real. I had been abducted from my tent in the middle of the night by something powerfully big, covered in dark flowing hair, that was carrying me on his shoulders. At this point, Ivan was the one that looked aghast. His mouth dropped open. His eyes stood up on stalks. You are kidding me. You're saying you were abducted from your tent in the middle of the night while you were camped out in this prepossessing location? This giant-sized thing was carrying you on his shoulders? You're not pulling a fast one on me, are you, Ryan? I'm not in the mood for a good joke. I'm really not. So much has happened to me of late, and I just can't handle a bit of humour like this. I'm not winding you up, nor am I joking. I'm telling you the truth, Ivan. I was physically abducted from my tent in the middle of the night by this whopping being covered in dark hair, and there were others of his kind, because they were whispering among themselves, talking together in a strange, unorthodox language that I did not understand. What the hell did you do when you discovered yourself on the back of this large thing's shoulders? I don't know what I would have done if that had been me. Well, I decided not to put up any fight, because I knew I was no match for this thing. But I pretended to be fast asleep. That, for me, was the best course of action. Anyway, they put me on the ground next to all my camping gear, food supplies and tent. They took none of my things from me, but abandoned me in this field. Then they simply walked away. I tried to follow them. As they were walking in the woods together, I wanted to know exactly who and what had abducted me. But when I cautiously followed them through the grove, they pretty much vanished before my eyes. I don't know if they had some kind of cloaking system, or whether they drifted off into a parallel universe or something. But believe me when I say they were gone, they were gone. Are you crazy, Ryan? What the hell is wrong with you? You escaped with your life. These beings dropped you off in the middle of a field with all your stuff, and then you foolishly tried to follow them. Are you completely insane? If that had been me, I would have been determined to put an end to my trip there and then. But no, you were completely irresponsible, it sounds. Well, you're not going to be impressed with what I did next, Ivan. I will admit that, and I will admit I was rather foolish. But I suppose my curiosity got the better of me. Ivan rolled his eyes. Why do I get the feeling that I'm not going to like what you have to say next? Because you're not going to like it. You think I was mad following these beings into the woodgrove, so you're going to think I'm madder for returning to my original camping spot, where I was abducted and camping there again for a second night. You did what? Asked Ivan, looking visibly appalled. What about this don't I understand? You were abducted from your tent in the middle of the night after camping at that spot, and then you go back there again. It's like asking for trouble, isn't it? I know. But I wanted answers, didn't I? Said Ryan, realizing how foolish he was sounding. I wanted to see what these beings actually were. I figured out that if they'd wanted to harm me, they would have done so already. So I did think that they were somewhat benevolent. The way they were whispering to each other when I was being carried away from my camp made me believe whatever they were emotionally intelligent. For some reason I felt they didn't want me camping in that spot, which was why they moved me away. Well, you figured that out, right? Said Ivan sarcastically. And then you go back and camp there again. That, in my mind, is the height of insanity. So tell me, you were abducted again, were you? Tossed back into that grassy field, I suspect. No, as it happens, I woke up that morning in the tent perfectly fine, thank you very much. Well, that's a relief, said Ivan. I'm glad these things, whatever they were, didn't come back for you. I wonder what abducted you. You say they were big and hairy. It was Bigfoot that abducted me, said Ryan. I promise you, these things are real. How do you know it was a Bigfoot? Asked Ivan. You didn't get to see them, did you? You were very fortunate that they didn't abduct you again. I mean, of all the senseless things to do, you went to camp back in the place you were originally abducted from. Most normal people would have wanted to end their trip then and there, but no, not you. You always do things your way, Ryan, and sometimes you make really foolish choices, if you don't mind my saying. I feel like shaking you up because you can be so infuriating at times. Ivan, I haven't finished my story yet. You were asking how I knew it was a Bigfoot that abducted me, and I know it was because the following morning, while I was preparing breakfast, the Bigfoot that originally abducted me came to see me. You expect me to believe all this? Said Ivan, rolling his eyes. This is far-fetched to me. I'm sorry, but it's hard to take in. Don't be so scathing, Ryan. I'm telling you the truth. The Bigfoot stood about 3 feet away from my tent, maybe 2. He spoke to me telepathically in my mind. I could actually physically hear his voice, even though it was speaking in my head. He told me I'd been camping on a portal that opens up every 2 days, which was why they moved me away that night, because the portal would have potentially swallowed me up. He said I needed to get away from it that evening, just because if I stayed and continued to camp in my spot, that the portal would swallow me whole and I'd never be seen again. He said I needed to get away from it because it was potentially very dangerous to be camping in that spot. So he actually helped me, Ivan. This Bigfoot helped me. They potentially saved my life, so to speak. Good Lord, said Ivan. I thought we'd been having drama at this end, but you didn't lie when you said you were having an adventure all of your own. So tell me, what did this Bigfoot look like? He was huge, Ivan, you have absolutely no idea. But despite his humongous size, when he approached me, I genuinely felt no fear. Even though he could have swatted me like a fly, and I'd have been a goner, let me tell you. There was something so majestic about him, something remarkable. It's hard to explain, but the moment I saw him, I sensed that he was wise and very kind. He wore a piece of jewellery around his neck. It was a leather thong with a pendant on it. He also had a leather bracelet around his wrist. When I saw him for the first time and established that eye contact with him, I felt extremely humbled, as if I was in the presence of someone very important. But his eyes, well, they were almost like pools of love, genuinely caring and compassionate, if you know what I mean. Good Lord, said Ivan. When people talk about Bigfoot encounters, I've always learned that they're dangerously volatile. But your description contrasts what I've heard about these things. Your experience is way different, it seems. Well, I guess he was just very human, said Ryan. Think about it. You get good human beings and bad human beings. Maybe it's the same with Bigfoots, but I'm telling you, this Bigfoot had my back. He wanted me to be safe. That was why he came to warn me. About the portal, I mean. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, and a few footsteps could be heard in the hallway. And when Ryan turned around, Alice was standing there, looking at him. The two impulsively ran into each other's arms and began to sob. They held each other so tightly, as if they never wanted to let go. I thought I'd lost you, said Ryan. I thought you and Piers. I know. I don't know what to say, Ryan. I'm really, really sorry. I'm so sorry that you got the wrong end of the stick like that. It must have been so horrible for you to find us like that together in bed. I should have never let your brother sleep in our bed that night. But we were both so exhausted, too tired to change the sheets. I let him sleep in the bed with me. He was in a bad way, Ryan. Having just heard that Meredith had vanished, he thought she may have killed her uncle, and then topped herself as well. He was in such a state, which is why I plied him with so much alcohol, and I was drunk myself. We drank far too much that night, and then he got violently sick over his own bed. And I was just too tired to do anything about changing his sheets. I know the full story. I'm very sorry, Alice, for ever doubting you like I did. You shouldn't be sorry, Ryan. It's all my fault, said Alice. She clasped her hands around Ryan's face and looked into his eyes tenderly. "You should have known me well enough, Ryan, to know that I would never, ever betray your trust. I would never dream of cheating on you. Why would you think so low of me?" To cut a long story short, Ryan remains very happily married to his wife Alice. They now have 3 children. Meredith and Pierce are also happily married, with 1 baby on the way. Meredith has come to terms with the past and has been able to move forward with her life. Ryan often thinks about the Bigfoot that abducted him, to save him from being swallowed up by a portal that opens up every 2 days. He has been camping in the Appalachian Mountains again, with his friend Ivan. But alas, he has had no more run-ins with the Bigfoot he encountered. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.